Would you like to make a prediction on how this fight between ExxonMobil and Venezuela will eventually play out?
Oh, I think eventually it will be settled. Typically these cases have a habit of being settled. Venezuela has much to gain with having an experienced company like Exxon involved in the development of the heavy oils. Exxon is very well known for their very well established and very well known technology in heavy oils, a very serious company. So there is no question that Exxon can make a big contribution to the future of Venezuela. And I think Venezuela will at a certain point in time focus on it. At the same time, Exxon will probably at a certain point in time consider the offer on the table, and sooner or later I believe the parties will get together. I hope they will get together. It would be good for the two parties to get together.
But in the meantime, the feelings are very raw, and people are not feeling great about each other.
There is always emotions during the period of negotiations. Of course, emotions could be higher or stronger. We have gone through a number of these cases. We had in Asia, of course, the question of Sakhalin with Shell and Russia, the same kind of rather difficult period of renegotiation. Currently, Shell and Russia and Gazprom seem to be well on their way in developing the Sakhalin resources. So at a certain point in time, these things settle out, and then obviously the parties are jointly pursuing a better future. And that is always how it seemed to work out.
On the other hand, the case between Venezuela and ExxonMobil is complicated by the relations between the US and the Chavez regime. Will that add an additional difficult layer to the discussions?
Not necessarily, because there are many other American oil companies who settled. So we have to, now, of course, politically there is a lot of fanfare going on in the political, but just the fact that it is a national oil, is a U.S. oil company, doesn't necessarily mean that there couldn't be a settlement. Venezuela has always welcomed American oil companies within their borders, so there is not, say, a policy in Venezuela not to deal with American oil companies. At the same time, the U.S. is still the largest consumer of Venezuelan oil, so despite all the rhetoric and politics on both sides, there is still a very, very strong commercial relationship between the two parties. So I believe that that aspect of the equation is maybe a little bit overblown.
What about Asia? We don't hear much about disputes going on in Asia. There's from time to time some disputes do come up between ExxonMobil and Indonesia. But most of Asia, would you say, is relatively calm? We don't have any big disputes going on?
No, the interesting part is the problem in the world where you see nations changing fiscal terms is because the fiscal terms may not have been designed very well from the beginning. Actually, some Asian nations did a much better job at thinking through how to structure the fiscal system under different prices. For instance, Malaysia, has a system that automatically adjusts to higher prices. So, for instance, Malaysia, way back, already agreed from the start with the oil companies what would happen in case of higher prices. And consequently, now the higher prices the aspect of the deal is automatically implemented, and consequently there is no need for disagreement. The reason that in Alaska, in the United States, in Alberta, say, changes were made in the fiscal terms is because the fiscal terms were not designed for higher prices. In the case of many Asian countries, fiscal terms are designed for higher prices. Nevertheless, even in Asia, governments are taking additional measures. The government of China, for instance, has introduced over the last 2 years what they call their windfall profit tax, just to benefit from the higher prices. And that is also somewhat in dispute at the moment.
That's an interesting comment. The fact that Malaysia has taken a very advanced look at the prices just in case things improve sharply, which have happened. Why would people in North America not take the same approach, or why didn't they take the same approach years ago? They have very good lawyers, I'm sure.
Yes, now each fiscal system in the world has its own history and its own background. Interestingly, what happened in Alaska and what happened in Alberta recently is actually to simulate the Malaysian aspects by making the fiscal system far more price sensitive. So Alaska has gone through two price sensitive formulas, Alberta has gone to price sensitive formulas, and consequently in both jurisdictions now, which are the major oil producing jurisdictions in North America, the fiscal system is now oriented to be much more flexible with price, as Malaysia already was.
Alberta is having a provincial elections on March the 3rd.
Yes.
How important is this royalty issue going to be in the final vote count? Do you think that people will take action against the government for raising the royalties?
No, no. Generally, the Alberta public was very much in favor of increasing the share. The Alberta Royalty Review Panel had recommended increases in royalties, in particular with respect to the oil sands. And about 2/3 of the Alberta population, they did a number of surveys, was in favor of increasing the royalties on oil sands and conventional. I think the government implemented fairly the recommendations on the panel on conventional, so I think, and made a number of adjustments which I think are highly qualified. So I think the issues on conventional oil and gas really should not be, from a professional point of view, issues that should really be election issues. On the oil sands side, the panel recommended a higher government take than the government accepted. They increased the royalties on oil sands, but not as much as the panel had recommended. And of course, some of the opposition parties in Alberta will be well qualified to point that out. And some of the voters may therefore react and then vote for opposition parties. It is generally, however, expected that the Conservative government may hang on to their government.
So overall, you think the increase in the royalty in Alberta was fair?
I would think my own recommendation, I was advisor to the panel actually in Alberta, so my own recommendation was to go for approximately 64% of the overall take. The government take was 48%. They settled on 58%, which is of course significant. I would have been somewhat happier with a stronger royalty system, but the government did a very good job, increasing the take for the Alberta, and I think therefore it is now a debatable item among the Alberta public whether they went far enough or whether they should have gone a little bit higher.
Well, to close off this interview, let me ask: are you due to come back to Asia for another class for 2008?
Oh, now we are very happy with the course in Singapore. Singapore is always an excellent location, of course, to have these kind of courses, and we have been very successful having the courses here every year, and consequently CWC, apart from the courses, of course, does other events, the conferences. They have had very famous LNG conference in Perth, Australia, for instance. So CWC for sure is. No, I'm not involved in the general. I'm involved in some general conferences, but not in all of them. So CWC has very many events and are expanding in this part of the world. They're well established in Middle East, Europe, Africa, and so on. And I have enjoyed every year giving the course here in the spring in Singapore, and we hope to do that for a very long time.
Will you be doing anything in Africa? That's another emerging territory.
Yes, I have worked in many, as I said, I've worked in many countries in the world. My last client in Africa was Algeria. Also, Algeria brought about significant fiscal change over the last few years, in line with the overall increases in government take on a worldwide basis. So Algeria also has increased their take, but we will have to see. They're now about to go out for a bidding round, so we'll have to see how the investor community is going to react to it.
Okay. On that note, thank you, Pedro.
A great pleasure to be here, and much success with your work.
Okay, thank you.